All right, today we're diving into a real head-scratcher from Northern California. It's a story about an official investigation that found a crime had been committed, but, and here's the twist, they couldn't find a single person to charge. So how does that even happen? Let's get into it. Now, this entire explainer is actually based on some incredible original reporting from our friends over at Shasta Unfiltered. They do a fantastic job covering local news and entertainment for Northern California. And this quote, this is really the core of the whole mystery. This is the final word from the Shasta County Sheriff's Office. They're basically saying, yep, we confirmed voter fraud is happening, but they couldn't point the finger at anyone. So how is that possible? We've got to trace the steps that led to this very strange dead end. You know, the interesting thing here is that this story didn't start with law enforcement at all. It actually began with a group of regular citizens who just decided to take a much closer look at the official voter rolls themselves. So let's put this on a timeline real quick. It all kicks off in February 2023. That's when this citizen group started their work. And then, just 6 months later, in August, you have the sheriff's office releasing its official report. A report, by the way, that was based almost entirely on what those citizens dug up. So what exactly did this group do? Well, it was a team of about 25 residents. They got their hands on the official voter rolls from the 2020 election, and they flagged over 600 addresses that just looked off. And they didn't stop there. They actually hit the streets, physically going to almost 500 of them to see what was really going on.
And what they started to find, well, it wasn't just a handful of mistakes. It was a clear, consistent pattern of voter registrations that were, to be honest, completely impossible. Let's take a look at the actual numbers. First up, 63. That's the number of addresses for registered voters that, when they went to check, just weren't there. We're not talking about an empty house. We're talking about a phantom address that never existed in the first place. Next, they found 155 voters who were registered at commercial business addresses. And let's be super clear, using a business as your home address for voting is a big no-no under California state law. It's just not allowed. And here's a really specific example that pops out. The Good News Rescue Mission, a local shelter, was listed as the home address for 53 different voters. Now, the staff there told the canvassers they had received and had to return thousands of ballots over the years for people who just didn't live there. And on top of all that, they found 82 cases where voters were still active on the rolls, but had moved away a long, long time ago. These are basically ghost registrations. Real people, but they're registered to vote at a place they no longer live. I mean, look at this. This slide really paints a picture of just how bizarre some of these addresses were. These weren't simple typos. They found people registered to vote at empty lots, addresses with a house number of 0. And get this, 136 registrations that didn't even have a street name, just a city. But the problems didn't stop at just weird addresses. They started finding direct contradictions in the voting records. For example, they talked to 2 voters whose records said they had voted, but they swore up and down they never did. And on the flip side, 5 people whose records said they had not voted confirmed that they absolutely did. And the red flags just kept piling up. There was this weird repeating date that kept showing up in the database. Maybe some kind of data glitch. They noticed a really high turnout rate for residents over the age of 90. And probably the most concrete finding, they found at least one confirmed case of a person who had died but was still recorded as having voted. Okay, so you've got this group of citizens with a mountain of evidence, photos, interviews, logs, the whole shebang. They hand it all over to the sheriff's office. So what happens when this thing becomes an official investigation? Well, the very first thing that came out of the official investigation was pretty straightforward. The sheriff's office confirmed that all the problems those citizens found were legit. This wasn't some kind of misunderstanding or a series of typos. The data was genuinely, seriously flawed. From there, the investigating deputies started connecting these findings to actual laws on the books. And yeah, it looked like some had definitely been broken. The first one basically makes it a crime to knowingly register someone who isn't eligible, like, say, at a business address where they don't actually live. Then there's this one, which is even more specific. It's the law that outlaws registering people who don't exist. You know, like deceased individuals, which is exactly one of the things they found. And finally, there's this statute, which makes it illegal to vote more than once. The fact that votes were being cast in the names of people who were deceased or people who insisted they never voted in the first place certainly suggested someone was casting fraudulent ballots, which is a clear violation of this law.
All right, so let's recap. We have confirmed problems, right? And we have specific laws that appear to have been broken, which brings us right back to that huge question from the beginning. If there's a crime, where's the culprit? Well, the answer, according to the official report, isn't a person. It's the system itself. It boils down to this. California's master voter file is all controlled at the state level by the Secretary of State. The local counties, they're kind of handcuffed. They can see all these problems, but they don't have the authority or the tools to get deep into the data and figure out who originally created these bogus registrations. And because they couldn't trace the bad data back to where it started, it was just impossible to identify a source and press charges. So that's really the heart of it. This investigation didn't find some criminal mastermind because, well, there wasn't one single person to find. Instead, what it did was shine a huge spotlight on some really serious systemic weaknesses in how California's voter rolls are kept. The problem wasn't a person, it was the entire process. And that, of course, leaves us with one last really big question. This investigation did a great job of documenting the problem, but it raises an even bigger question about accountability. Who's responsible for actually finding and implementing a solution? Hey, if you found this breakdown interesting and you like getting into the weeds on complex issues like this one, do us a huge favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. And of course, for more great reporting on what's happening in Northern California, you've got to check out the source for today's explainer. Head on over to shastaunfiltered.com. Thanks so much for watching.